Greetings and welcome to the Final William podcast. The podcast that almost didn't happen this week because Cookie Clicker version 2 came out, and that game just eats all productivity. I've played that game this week more than I've cared to admit, and I'm not sure if I should hate myself for it or not. Yeah, I probably should. Just, man, it's been, I've been out of it for so long, and then you hear that version 2 of the game comes out and a whole bunch of stuff is added and you're right back in. And I haven't even scratched the surface of some of the crazy things that you can do to upgrade your cookie per second counter in that game. But I've made over 400 trillion cookies so far, so, that's a thing. Anyway, this is the Final William podcast, and it's my show, and it allows me to talk about whatever I want. And so to start off this week of conversation, we're not going to talk about anime. We're going to talk about anime. We're not going to talk about wrestling or obstacle courses or any of that jazz. We're going to talk about some anime. So here's some random news that I found to be interesting. So first up, Funimation this season has been airing Dimension W, which is the latest anime that they have a production stake in. And they just announced that the dub of the show will begin airing on Toonami starting February 27th. And then 2 weeks after that, they will start airing the dub on their website. So, I'm gonna check that out. It's gonna be on at 12:30, which is right after Dragon Ball Z Kai. I've been interested in the show. I haven't had a chance to check it out yet, so we'll see if it's any good. Unfortunately, I probably won't. There's a extremely strong chance I won't be able to watch it as it's airing on Adult Swim that first night because National Ninja League finals are that weekend, so I'll have to catch it on demand afterwards, and then I'll be able to watch it live the remaining weeks afterwards. But yeah, looking forward to that. Also, if you followed me, you may have heard me talk about this show called Mr Osomatsu that I like a lot. Well, apparently, after the first 2 weeks of being on sale, Volume 1 of the show in Japan, when you combine the Blu-ray and DVDs together, have sold over 92,000 copies, which is a lot for anime or just anything in Japan in general. There's not, especially for a TV show, there's not a lot of things that you look at the charts. Sales generally don't go that high for first couple of weeks, unless it's, like a movie or something. But yeah, it seems to be a combination of it has an original episode due to that whole issue with the first episode being a parody of stuff, and it had had a coupon to some sort of event, and the fact that the show is very popular in both gender demographics, and show seems like to be a real hit. And I'm waiting very patiently for someone to announce that they've licensed the show for North America, because no one's done it yet. It baffles me that that's one of the shows that haven't got licensed, considering almost every show that has a legal stream in North America gets licensed or home release. It's one of the outliers, and that's a bit concerning for me. But what's weird, and I don't know, I really shouldn't be surprised that this is an actual thing, but it was recently announced that there's going to be a Mr. Osomatsu live-action gay porn parody made about the series. And, of course, there's going to be, because, like I said before, it's popular in both demographics, which means that the female fan base is higher than people would expect for an anime series. And yeah, it apparently the series is going to be pairing up Ichimatsu and Karamatsu together, which when I think about it, that is probably the most logical pairing to do if you're going to do a gay porn parody. And I don't know, man. When I first saw this news, my immediate reaction was just, "Of course there is. Of course there is." I'd be surprised if there wasn't at this point. So yeah, that's happening. So I'm not watching it. But if you're interested in it, maybe you should check it out. Although I do find it kind of ironic, given that there's a porn parody being made of a show that got in trouble for parodying other stuff. It's Japan in parodies is weird because there's no actual like fair use law in Japan, but yet there's a lot of stuff out there that parodies other things in Japan to the point where it seems like the policy is unofficially you do a parody of something and hope no one complains. And unfortunately for Mr. Osomatsu, someone complained, probably. And and I have a feeling that this porn parody is not going to have any complaints against it. The other bit of anime news I want to talk about is that Sentai Filmworks has started to announce who the English dubcast for Monthly Girls Nozaki-kun is going to be for their release. And so far that they revealed that Mikoto Mikoshiba is going to be played by Scott Gibbs. And whenever they do these cast announcements, they always play a little, very short clip of them in the studio dubbing portion of the show. I am not familiar with Scott Gibbs. When I look at what other things he's done, it makes sense because I haven't seen any of the shows that he's done. And he hasn't done that much compared to like other anime voice actors. The voice for Mikoshiba, it wasn't what I would expect it to be. It wasn't bad. It was just kind of, oh, okay. Might have to get used to it, but he seems fine as an actor. So yeah, looking forward to that. What I really liked, though, immediately was when they revealed that Yu Kashishima, or Kashima, was going to be is voiced by Monica Rial, who I imagine really enjoyed playing this role because it's not a little girl and she doesn't have to do her little girl voice. That's always like the thing. That's always the fun thing is that when it comes to Monica Rial, she gets typecast into a very specific voice type. But then every once in a while you hear roles like, her playing Hotchkin and Michiko and Hotchkin, and even this where it's deeper. And in the short clip that they played, it actually, I thought it worked really well just from that one clip. So really looking forward to that. And, eventually they're going to reveal the other characters. I'm just patiently waiting for them to announce Sakura and Nozaki-kun, who their voice actors are, because to me those are the two most important voices. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Anyway, that's enough anime talk for now. Let's talk about some wrestling. So obviously the big news about Monday Night Raw this week was the retirement of Daniel Bryan. I'm actually going to save that until the end of the show, because I feel like that should be its own segment. Monday Night Raw was an episode that I considered myself. I think I enjoyed it more than I should have, and maybe that was just because of Daniel Bryan's speech at the end being really good. But I don't know. There was nothing with the episode that was particularly offensive, but it's one of those things where it's like, they suffer from the 3-hour length, and it's just, yeah, it is what it is. So, most of the matches were kind of forgettable. They serve purposes for storyline for the most part, but the matches themselves were kind of just there. You had Dolph Ziggler beating Kevin Owens by using his feet on the rope for leverage. It was a fine match, but it was kind of weird that they had the babyface cheat to win. I would love to see where this is going. I imagine they're going to have a match at Fastlane. I can't imagine that they're going to drag this out to WrestleMania because they really shouldn't. Bray Wyatt defeated Ryback in a match that, I don't know. It was so weird because they did a vignette for Ryback, and this was the first episode of Raw where he showed off his new outfit, which that's going to take some getting used to because I'm used to the singlet that he wore, and now he's just wearing the Speedo briefs. So, I'll have to get used to that. It was fine. Their pay-per-view match from a while back was a lot better. Confusingly, Adam Rose beat Titus O'Neil thanks to some distractions and stuff. And then Titus O'Neil immediately beat up the Social Outcasts. And it got even weirder when the whole big news about Titus O'Neil broke out. For those of you who don't know, after Raw went off the air, the WWE Network started airing some more footage from Raw, kind of like after show thing, of kind of like Daniel Bryan thanking the fans and everyone on the stage up at the Titantron, cheering for Daniel Bryan. What was weird was that, and you might have missed this because this was at the very end of the broadcast, but after Bryan left, Vince, Stephanie, and Triple H were leaving, and Titus O'Neil grabbed Vince's arm in what reports were describing as a very playful manner. What was odd is that after Titus grabbed Vince's arm, Vince clearly shoves Titus O'Neil, and that's when they went off the air. You didn't see what happened after that. And then it was reported that Titus O'Neil got suspended for 90 days for unprofessional conduct. The 90 days was later shortened to 60 days, but that's still baffling because when you fail a drug test in WWE for the first time, you get penalized, you get suspended for 30 days, and a second strike of failing the drug policy is a 60-day suspension. So apparently what Titus O'Neil did is worse, initially at least, was worse than failing a drug test twice, which, I don't know. It makes me wonder if there was something else going on, if, maybe something happened behind the scenes that Titus should have done. The fact that Titus won a bunch of matches and then kind of lost to Adam Rose in kind of a pathetic manner makes me wonder if there was something going on beforehand. And if it was, it's like they like Titus. They like promoting the fact that he won that Father of the Year award and the charity work he does. So if there was something that, I don't know, it just seems so bizarre that would be the sole reason why he would get suspended for so long. And if that is the sole reason why he got suspended for so long, that's, quite frankly, really messed up. And, it doesn't look good on WWE because, people are assuming that it might be some sort of racial thing, which, if true, that's really messed up. And I can totally understand why people would think that. I just hope that this is something that could be resolved. It's just very bizarre because we have a few of the pieces, and the pieces that we have of the story don't go together. They don't make sense. Something's off. And I don't know, maybe we'll get some more answers, but right now the whole suspension thing is very bizarre, and I like Titus, so I hope we don't have to wait so long to see him again. Also on Monday Night Raw, it was announced that Charlotte will be defending her Divas title against Brie Bella at Fastlane on February 21st. Some people, I'm not saying a lot of people are saying this, but I saw some people saying that, like, oh, she's getting the title shot because her husband is retiring and stuff. I don't think that's the case. It's, it was made very clear the prior week that was the direction they were going because they had Brie beat Charlotte in a non-title match, and Sasha and Becky, started feuding with Team Bad. it seems like the story was based around the idea at first that Brie is trying to defend the honor of her sister, and now it looks like she might be trying to defend the honor of both her sister and her husband. But yeah, it seems like that was, and it seems like it seems like that Brie is basically a placeholder match or a filler match, so to speak, so that they could save either Charlotte versus Sasha or Charlotte versus Sasha versus Becky for WrestleMania. This doesn't seem like a case of her getting a title match because Daniel Bryan's her husband, because they were already going this direction. But as a warm up, Charlotte beat Alicia Fox. It was fine. It was fine. It was a fine match. Also, I'm glad that Brie's now officially a face again, because she kind of wavered for a little bit after Nikki left due to injury. And honestly, it's better because now whenever she does the Daniel Bryan kicks, it makes sense for people to cheer for her, because it didn't matter if she was a heel or a face, people cheered for her either way when she did those. One thing that I really liked was the Miz TV segment with Chris Jericho, because I actually found this really funny. Jericho, mid-show, basically got the crew to change the segment from Miz TV to Chris Jericho's highlight reel, and that was funny, just seeing the transformation and everything. The entire point of the segment was basically just to promote the ongoing feuds featuring Miz, Jericho, and AJ Styles. It worked perfectly fine. They had their match on SmackDown. It was first interrupted by Social Outcasts, so they teamed together. And then during the main event, Jericho and AJ wrestled each other, and Jericho won. It was a very competitive match. It was a good match. It seems like they want Jericho to be his first, AJ Styles' first major feud, and maybe they're gonna have a rematch at Fastlane. Maybe they're gonna stretch it out to WrestleMania. Who knows? But overall it's working. And AJ can't win all the time, and if they wanted to do a third match with Jericho and AJ Styles, Jericho had to win at some point. And also, it seems like they're trying to build up SmackDown as a place for, as a show that matters. So yeah, I have no problem with what they did. What else happened? Let's see. Sin Cara came back and is teamed up with Kalisto against the Lucid Dragons. Del Rio and Rusev teamed up to face them in a match. Alberto pinned Kalisto. I imagine the idea was to build up the idea that Alberto might get his title back at Fastlane when they fight each other. I hope that doesn't happen, but the match itself was fine. I feel like I'm saying that a lot. Also, so it was originally announced in a they had an episode-long storyline, which is fine. I wouldn't mind if they did this more often. So it was originally announced that the Usos were going to have a tables match against the New Day. But then the Dudley Boys came to the New Day's locker room and said, hey, that's our thing. We should team up and make it an 8-man tag. And they did. And then New Day had to find another partner, and they ended up picking Mark Henry, and you had the fun image of Mark Henry wearing the unicorn horn, playing the trombone, and dancing, and I immediately got flashbacks to Sexual Chocolate all over again, and that was fun. The match itself was just there. There was as far as tail matches go, this one kind of fell flat. Mark Henry eventually left the New Day because they did something to anger him, which, that's fine as it was, because he's technically a face, but Dudley Boys and Usos end up getting the win. But then, which was the main point of the match, the Dudley Boys turned on the Usos, seemingly because they were angry over gimmick infringement. It's like, hey, you can't have a tables match, that's our thing. And I know on SmackDown, the Dudley Boys cut a promo where basically they said that they were no longer going to be a nostalgia act, and they had the crew put all the tables away so that no one could go through tables anymore. And I'm looking forward to seeing what these new heel Dudley Boys do. I imagine it's going to be more aggressive, more cheating, maybe even closer to what you would see during the old ECW days. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. And Tamina and Becky Lynch had a match with Sasha and Naomi at ringside. Tamina won. It seemed like the whole idea was just to kind of build the idea that that Becky and Sasha, they need to learn to work together better. It was a forgettable match, but it was fine. So outside of Daniel Bryan retiring, the other major non-storyline for Raw this past week involved the main event of Fastlane. So at the beginning of the show, Lesnar, Reigns, and Ambrose had a contract signing for their match at Fastlane. And after they signed everything, you had this really awesome visual where Lesnar threw Ambrose into Reigns and then threw the table into Reigns and hit Ambrose with an F5. And then later on the show, Ambrose called Ambrose called out Lesnar to fight, and Lesnar put him out with an F5, and then Ambrose got up and said, it was like, hey, come on, I'm not down. And Reigns came out for the distraction, and Ambrose hit Lesnar with a low blow. And you would think after all the times Undertaker would kick Lesnar in the balls, you would think he would start wearing a cup more often. Oh God. But it's so bizarre because I thought all the segments were fine, but what's really bizarre is that the build-up for this triple threat match seems to be focusing more on Ambrose and Lesnar, and Reigns is kind of left on the outside. What's really weird is that, I'm under the impression that Reigns is winning this thing, and I'm also under the impression that at WrestleMania we're not getting a Ambrose versus Lesnar match. So it's kind of weird that the focus is on Ambrose versus Lesnar in this triple threat, but who knows? Maybe they're going to surprise us and either have Ambrose win the match or have at WrestleMania have it Ambrose versus Lesnar instead of Lesnar versus Bray Wyatt, which is what it seemed like they're leaning towards. So we'll have to wait and see. All right, then. Moving on to NXT. So this was the first episode that was taped from the University of Central Florida. They taped a whole bunch of episodes there. So this is the first one. And this first episode was basically just a bunch of, it's a bunch of wrestling matches that were designed to build people up, and one awesome main event. The first match was, I'm just going to go through most of this stuff kind of quickly. The first match was Baron Corbin versus Johnny Gargano. It was a really good match. It was heavily contested. In the end, Baron Corbin hit the end of days, and what I really like about Baron Corbin is that he's been working on kind of hitting the ends of days seemingly out of nowhere on people. So that it makes the endings more exciting, and I really like that. So yeah, that was really good. Hype Bros defeated two, unnamed. I mean, they have names, but it's like, who cares who they are, guys, in a tag match. What was really noticeable is that the Hype Bros got a more positive reaction here than they probably have anywhere, despite the fact that they're, always been faces. So that's good for them. I don't know if it's because the University of Central Florida are more into the Hype Bros characters than other places, but, it's working, at least here. So it was good stuff. Alexa Bliss defeated Cameron in a match. It's kind of weird because it's technically heel versus heel, although the crowd had no problem cheering for Alexa Bliss because she is the by far better wrestler. Oh man, Cameron will never live down the mistakes that she made in the past, between saying that Melina versus Alicia Fox was her favorite match, and trying to pin Naomi while Naomi was stomach down instead of back down in a match. Yeah, Cameron's, she's learning, but yeah, she's not great. But yeah, Alexa Bliss won with the sparkle splash, which it's good. I like the move. Unfortunately, Elias Sampson had a match against Jesse Sorensen, which, as someone who's watched a bunch of TNA in the past, that still blows my mind that Jesse Sorensen is a job guy in NXT. But I can't get into Elias Sampson. I don't understand his character. I don't understand what he's trying to accomplish. I don't like is the point of his character is to get people to boo him because he's boring and crap? And if that's the case, then it's working. I don't get why his finisher is a neck breaker. The elbow drop was better. I don't know. There's nothing interesting about Elias Sampson for me. So yeah, it was just a completely forgettable match. And the only thing that I do like about Elias Sampson is theme song. It's a genuinely good theme song that should go to anyone else but him. Anyway, the main event of the show was Bayley defending the women's championship against her best friend Carmella. And early on in the night, they had an interview with them together, saying that after the match was said and done, that they're still going to be friends no matter what. And it turns out that was true. Now, previously I said that I was really looking forward to Bayley versus Carmella because I imagine that because they're good friends, they're going to do what they can to have a really good match together. And it turns out I was right. It was a really good match. And, I'm sure other people have said this. This is by far the best Carmella match to date. The best match that she has had. And they even got people, she even got people to get behind her at one point when she did the two diving crossbodies through the rope on Bayley. And there was a lot of just solid wrestling between the two. It went back and forth. I like that Bayley pinned her with a counter roll up and not like definitively with her finisher. So it kind of created this idea that like, oh, Carmella was really close, but Bayley was able to escape with the title more or less, and the two of them hugged and celebrated. And when Carmella was leaving, she got jumped by Nia Jax and Eva Marie, and got a lot of heat. Bayley tried fighting the two of them off. And, but I mean, it's 2-on-1. It's, it's hard to do. But then who comes out but Asuka? Asuka comes out. Basically, the Nia and Eva back out. And then Asuka turns to Bayley and very clearly indicates that she wants Bayley's NXT Women's Championship. And so it appears, because I haven't looked at the spoilers. It appears that at NXT TakeOver Dallas, it's going to be Bayley versus Asuka, which is very exciting because those two are clearly the best two women's wrestlers that NXT has right now. So in theory, it should be a really good match. I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, Bayley versus Carmella. You should check that out. It was a really good match. And I'm looking forward to the possibility of Asuka versus Bayley in the future. And it's kind of funny because, Street Fighter V is coming out this upcoming Tuesday, which is kind of weird because Capcom's not making a big deal. But there's this whole thing with like Armika, and during one of her supers, she like slapped her butt, but then I think Capcom, they changed it later so that you couldn't see the butt slap. The thing that I find funny is that I'm pretty sure that move, that portion of the animation was inspired by Asuka, because Asuka slaps her butt a lot during her matches, especially after she hits someone in the face with her butt while the butt is flying in the air. So it does seem kind of weird that that's the thing that they took out, instead of just because that's based on like a real thing that a real Japanese women's wrestler has done. So I don't know, that's just like a little thing I wanted to point out. But yeah, moving on. So let's talk about some Team Ninja Warrior now, shall we? So episode 4 just aired this past week on the Esquire Network. And in this particular episode, we saw Team Ronin, headed by Flip Rodriguez and joined by JJ Woods and Tiana Weberly, face off against Team Carsonic Boom in the first round, which was headed by Carson Voiles and joined by Brendan Barrett and Beth Higginbottom. And then in the second round, we saw second match of the first round, we saw Team Think Tank, which was headed by Noah Kaufman and joined by Matt Wilder and Asya Grechka. Asya Grechka, I believe that's pronounced. And they faced off against Team Wild Bunch, which was headed by Lance Pekas and joined by Ben Mielek and Rose Wetzel. And overall, I really liked this episode. I didn't like it as much as episode 3. And that's partially because there was some weird editing going on towards the end of the show. But this episode had a mix between really good, close races that came down to the warped wall, or really early yet entertaining wipeouts. That's basically what you got this episode. And so in this course, the fifth obstacle this time around was the flying shelf, which is a bit weird because, of the 4 items that they had to grab and swing from, only one of them was a shelf. The other 3 were bars. And the final bar, it was bar, shelf, bar, bar. And the final bar, there was, instead of being 2 for each lane, there was 1, so that the 2 people could be like right next to each other when they're competing and maybe touch each other a little bit. So yeah, that was, I don't know. I mean, it was a fine obstacle, but calling it the flying shelf is kind of eh. But one thing I noticed is that I am fairly certain that this episode was filmed before the first 3 episodes were filmed, because when you look at the first round, Team Ronin versus Team Carsonic Boom, if you were to be running the course, the lane on the left-hand side, the button, instead of being on the right side, is on the left side. In the right-hand lane, the button is on the left side. And during the first 3 runs, both lanes had the button on the left side. But 2 of the 3 rounds, both heats, rather, the males, came down to the warped wall. And in both cases, the person on the left hand, in the left lane, went for the wrong button. Now, the good news is this didn't cost anyone the victory, but it was very clear that because of where the buttons are placed, the person in the left-hand lane thought that the right-hand lane button was theirs that had to be pressed. And so the first round, the first match between Ronin and Carsonic Boom ended up going to the tiebreaker. So in between the third heat and the tiebreaker, the button on the left-hand lane actually got moved to the right-hand side. So they, clearly they recognized that the button placement is not ideal, and they fixed that. So good on them. But because of that little inconsistency, it is my belief that episode 4 was filmed before the first 3. We also got a bit of a first, and unfortunately that belongs to Ben Mielek, who is the first person that we've seen fail the first obstacle of the course. He failed the final rope part of the Sonic Swing, and his heat ended very quickly. Actually, it was not a good episode for the Wild Bunch because they got shut out in both their matches. Yeah, it's a shame because I really like Lance Picus, but they were not having they weren't having a good time. We also had Isa Grechka and Rose Wurtzel have a really, to me, a really amusing collision. This is the first time we've had like a true collision between two. Both women on the Dancing Stones were going for the same singular stone that's in the middle, and in the end, Greshka ended up getting the better of that. She completed the obstacle, but Rose took a dive. Good on Grechka for being able to stay up from that impact, because they could have both easily have gone down. But yeah, I actually found that to be very amusing to watch. Really, I don't know. I think it's partially just because I've seen MXC for so long, is that when you see those types of wipeouts, you're just kind of like, yeah, that was fun. So yeah, overall, really entertaining episode. Team Ronin and Team Think Tank ended up going to the relay, but what was really weird is that in the Think Tank versus Carsonic Boom match in round 2, they ended up fast forwarding 2 of the 4 runs, and as a result, it was kind of like it almost felt like the heat didn't actually happen. And I think for Team Ninja Warrior, you kind of need to see all the heats to really get into it, because kind of the whole fast forward stuff kind of feels, I don't know. It definitely. Yeah, I don't know what was different, because I don't know. It didn't feel like there was more runs than episode 1 that they had to fast forward 2 of them. The only thing I think of is that maybe some of the fluff pieces were longer, but even then, I don't know. It didn't really feel like it, so it was kind of bizarre. It kind of put a bit of a damper, because it seemed like the races themselves were actually pretty good, but unfortunately, we didn't get to see them. But it came down to relay, like I said, between Ronin and Think Tank. Unfortunately for Team Think Tank, Oscar Grechka did not push off on the log grip properly and got stuck in no man's land and lost a lot of time for her team. And Team Think Tank just couldn't catch up from that point. It was all Ronin afterwards. And Team Ronin moving on to the finals, along with Team TNT, Team Midoriyama, Team Expendables. So we'll have to see who joins them. The other significant note is that Tiana Weberly became only the 5th American woman to clear the warped wall in a official televised competition. So good on her. That was really cool to see. Also, at one point we did have dueling women trying to get up the warped wall, but overall it was a nice little moment, and I'm sure she was very exciting and good for her. And overall, good episode. Bit of weird editing towards the end, but it didn't it didn't ruin the experience. But we'll have to look forward to see. I actually have no idea who is going to be in next week's episode, because I haven't seen any of the previews, so we'll have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, Team Ninja Warrior, overall, still really good to watch. And if you haven't checked it out yet, I recommend checking it out. And now for something a bit more somber. As I mentioned earlier, it was the main event of Raw, the final segment, I should say, was Daniel Bryan officially announcing his retirement from professional wrestling. And there was definitely, I imagine for a lot of wrestling fans, myself included, there was a whirlwind of emotions from that entire day. Because he announced it on Twitter around, I believe it was around 1 my time, that he was going to retire. And then there was, all these stories and speculations of what was going on because, he's been out for quite some time now, since like I think it was May of last year, and I think there was a lot of people who probably, they probably saw the writing on the wall, but you don't want to believe it. And when it comes to wrestling, over the years, we've kind of been trained to believe that when a wrestler says that they're retiring, it doesn't actually mean that they're retiring, because how many retirement angles have there been where the person comes back, and wrestles again, even when they actually do mean to retire? So, there was a lot of people who were expecting Daniel Bryan to, do this big speech, and then someone would interrupt him. Maybe the Undertaker, maybe someone else. Who knows? There was just this, I guess, hope that people had that this was all just a work, because it's not like people want Daniel Bryan to get back in the ring just so he can get hurt more. They don't want. They were hoping that the news that he was too hurt to wrestle wasn't true. But it turns out that it was true. Unfortunately, Daniel Bryan, as it's well documented, has had a history of concussions, and after a series of tests, he had been convinced that he should not wrestle anymore. That is not safe. And it wasn't announced on Raw, but during his interview on SportsCenter the next day, he did admit that he was hiding the fact that he was having seizures due to his concussions, which that right there, like, is convincing that he should definitely not do this anymore. And and the other reason that people thought that this might have been a work is that Daniel Bryan, WWE has been very resistant with kind of putting Daniel Bryan in a super main event spot, and the fact that it's kind of ironic that the time that they truly treated him as one of the biggest stars in the company was on his last day, because they gave him a lot of time. They did all these great, they did his promo packages for him, talking about his career in WWE. They, showed matches from his career, some of the highlights, him winning at WrestleMania. It's been a really interesting story. And I don't know, maybe for like next 10 to 15 minutes at this point, I just kind of want to talk about my feelings. I'm not going to pretend that I knew Daniel Bryan was before WWE, because I didn't. I first saw Daniel Bryan on the very first episode of NXT, and right away I knew that he was a big deal, because the show itself made a good enough of a point to make him seem like a big deal. And his first match was against Chris Jericho, and it was a really good match. And there was some weird stuff that happened in NXT afterwards. By the way, this was before NXT was good. This was back when NXT was using the fake reality show format. It was weird, but it was clear that he was talented. And then he got fired due to the whole tie incident with the where the 8 members from the season 1 of NXT attacked John Cena in Raw, and Daniel Bryan made the mistake of using a tie to choke one of the ring announcers, and he ended up getting fired for it due to complaints. He ended up coming back a few months later at SummerSlam, seemingly to kind of just, after everything just kind of brushed under, and he shortly after that won the U.S. title by beating The Miz. And what we got was a lot of weird stuff with Daniel Bryan. You had the storyline where the Bellas were, fighting over who would have sex with him first under some kind of weird bet, and then it turns out he was dating Gail Kim. That didn't last long. You had the match with Sheamus that got bumped to the dark match, and then on the dark match it got turned into from a lumberjack match to a battle royal. So they didn't get to have their match at WrestleMania. But then you had him win Money in the Bank, and he became the World Heavyweight Champion. But then at WrestleMania the next year, he lost the belt to Sheamus in less than a minute. And it distracted a lot of people from WrestleMania, the rest of the show, because that was the first match. And, it really sucked because Sheamus and Daniel Bryan could have a good match together. But 2 years in a row, we've been denied that ability to see that. And then, you had the build up to WrestleMania 30 where he wasn't put in, So at SummerSlam before WrestleMania 30, he faced John Cena for the WWE Championship. And this was at the point where he was at his hottest, probably. And much to everyone's surprise, Bryan beat Cena clean using a new finisher, so it was really surprising. And then it turned into the Authority being created, where Triple H turned on Daniel Bryan and Randy Orton used the Money in the Bank briefcase to essentially steal the title from Daniel Bryan. And at the time, it seemed like it was going to lead to a very interesting storyline with Daniel Bryan trying to get the title back. And everyone thought that, he was going to win the match win the Royal Rumble match. Problem is that he wasn't in the Royal Rumble match that year. And instead they had Batista win, who had just returned a few weeks earlier after a 4-year absence. The crowd turned on the match. They booed Batista to hell. And even Batista in interviews have said that the whole thing with bringing him back as a face and putting him in the position that they did was not a good idea. For some reason, they didn't want to have Daniel Bryan as the champion. However, in between Elimination Chamber and WrestleMania, they changed plans. They had that awesome Occupy Raw segment where Daniel Bryan had the ring filled with fans and filled the area around the ring, and they basically created this scenario where Daniel Bryan had to face Triple H at WrestleMania, and if he won, he got to be in the main event at WrestleMania for the championship. And he ends up doing that. He ends up winning. Both matches were really good, and it was a good moment. It honestly, it probably created a better story than, otherwise, but it was a sign of WWE not truly capitalizing on someone when the crowd loves them. And then, unfortunately, a couple months later, he got injured and had to relinquish the title. And then, prior to the Royal Rumble 2015, he came back, and they had him eliminated very early in the match. And the audience just completely turned on the entire match to the point where they were rooting for the evil Russian, America-hating bad guy Rusev instead of, the supposed heroic, hero Roman Reigns, who was being endorsed by The Rock that very match. People were so angry at Daniel Bryan getting eliminated the way he did, that they were booing The Rock. That's how angry it was. And at WrestleMania 31 last year, he won the Intercontinental Championship in a really good ladder match. And then he had to vacate the title because of more injuries. And that was it. His final match was him teaming up with John Cena to face Tyson Kidd and Cesaro in a match on SmackDown. What's unfortunate is that match, everyone's injured who was in that match. They're all out for injury currently, and Daniel Bryan's retired. And everyone who left WrestleMania 31 as champion is out for injury. So I don't know what's going on in that company, but the speech that Daniel Bryan gave was so passionate. You honestly believe, and for good reason, he loves pro wrestling. And there was that photo of him before he came out, crying in the back with his wife Bree, consoling him. You can tell that he genuinely doesn't want to stop doing this, but he has to. And it really sucks because it's never fun to see someone have to retire on terms that are not their own. It's very rare that you see a professional wrestler end their career on their own terms. I think the only person you could actually point to, at least in WWE, is Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels retired in the main event of WrestleMania 26 when he lost his final match in a retirement match against Undertaker. And much to everyone's surprise, he might be one of the first wrestlers in history to say that he was going to retire if he lost a match and then actually stay retired. He's still retired, and that's amazing. But very few wrestlers get that luxury, and with Daniel Bryan, he didn't get that luxury. And what kind of sucks is that he's still in his 30s. He's still, he's still relatively young for a wrestler. And it was really sad to see him go. But it's kind of ironic, like I said, that this was the night that WWE decided to treat him as the biggest star, which was on his last night. And, props for them. They made it, he was in his hometown, as close as you can be for wrestling. He got just the entire audience was just cheering for him. I don't think there was a single person who wasn't cheering. You can see in the audience there were people crying during his speech. There was this one hilarious part where people were chanting yes, 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 and Bryan just decides to go, "That's what I make Bree say every night," which a bit uncharacteristic for him on the microphone, but it was a legitimately funny moment. He said he was very grateful to the fans and how everyone made him feel, and it's one of the best retirement speeches you could have, because you can tell that he genuinely loved his job, and he deserves probably much more credit than he'll ever get as a professional wrestler. And so, if you ever want, if you've never seen Daniel Bryan for whatever reason, go check out some of his stuff. He is such a good wrestler. I realize he was a good wrestler from day one, and just every day one on WWE, and every match that I've seen, I knew he was good, and I saw him, and I always rooted for him, whether he was a bad guy or a good guy. I got behind him as a person, and I'm going to miss him, because he's one of my favorite wrestlers of the modern wrestling era, and he deserves all the praise that he gets and so much more. But I'll end it on this. Two things. If you haven't seen Daniel Bryan and you want an example of how popular this guy was, look up a clip from YouTube on WWE's official YouTube channel. It is from the January 13th, 2014 episode of Raw, titled, and the clip is titled, Daniel Bryan Makes an Important Decision. Basically, Bryan was working for the Wyatt family for a couple of weeks. It's a bit weird how, all that happens and stuff, but basically they just finished having a cage match. He was teaming up with Bray Wyatt, and they lost, and it looked like he was, because Bray Wyatt's cult leader, it looked like Daniel Bryan was going to prove his loyalty by letting him be quote-unquote sacrificed by getting beat up by Bray Wyatt. And Daniel Bryan, when he reverses out of Bray Wyatt's finisher, Sister Abigail, the crowd becomes unglued. And as he starts to turn and beat up Bray Wyatt, the crowd goes nuts for him. And just getting that reaction from the crowd is so... Unfortunately, it's a lot rarer than it should be in modern WWE. And it's the perfect example of how popular this guy was. So, if there's one clip of Daniel Bryan you should watch, that's the one that you should watch. There's a bunch of other ones that you should watch, but if you can only watch one, that's the one I could watch. And on a very final note, on the extremely slim chance that Daniel Bryan happens to hear this, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for all the entertainment. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for being one of my favorite wrestlers, because you are amazing, and your passion has only helped this industry of professional wrestling. And I wish you the best of luck in whatever you choose to do in your future. Thank you, and goodbye. And that's going to end it for us this week on the Final William podcast. Thank you very much for listening. If you want, you can check out my stuff on 222productions.com and 2-2.com. In addition, follow me on Twitter at 2d2will. And, subscribe to those channels and stuff to stay up to date on the latest happenings with things that I make. But until next week, thank you all for listening, and I will see you later.